Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here, and most of you know me from Thoughtful Creativity, but this time welcome to Sew and Grow, a completely new channel that's specifically dedicated to sewing and creating beautiful clothes for, I was going to say little, but not everybody has little kids, so creating beautiful clothes for kids in our lives. And I truly hope that you're going to join us on this journey because my daughter and I, we absolutely love being creative together. You know, I do most of the sewing, she does most of the growing, and I truly hope that this channel is going to bring you a lot of inspiration. And today we have a really special project. We are going to be creating beautiful dresses for Project Dress a Girl hosted by Mari Sews for the month of September. As you know, on Thoughtful Creativity, this is the third year that I participate, and every year I make a free sewing pattern that is inspired by my daughter. And because I am not a commercial pattern designer, that's why these patterns come in one size only, because that's the size of my daughter. She's almost 5, so this free sewing pattern is ages 4 to 5, so that way when you see the dress on her, you have a little bit of a reference on how it fits. About this dress is that the top here is knit and the bottom here is woven, and that is one of the requirements for Project Dress a Girl when it comes to including knit fabrics in the design of the dress. And as you know, they also have requirements for what kind of fiber content we can use, what kind of prints can be included, the thickness and the see-through of the fabric, pockets, where to place the label on the dress, and a lot of different things like that. So to make sure that we are all on the same page and we're doing the right thing, I will leave the link with all of those requirements for you guys in the description of the video. There you will also be able to find the free sewing pattern for this dress, which will include the front bodice, the back bodice, the sleeve, and the pocket, because the skirt of the dress is just a simple rectangle, so it's gonna go real easy, real simple. So I'm starting with a selection of the fabrics for my project. For the top part, I have a lovely cotton knit, 100% cotton, and I can't say that this is truly medium weight, it probably isn't, but it's sturdy enough, and we want a really nice sturdy knit to support the weight of the gathered skirt on the bottom. And here what I'm looking for is for a nice stretch horizontally, but not as much stretch vertically. You can perhaps use interlock knit, French terry, and even medium weight t-shirting. For the bottom here, I have also cotton woven in this wonderful light blue color. Now let's go ahead and print out the pattern. The title page has a lot of important information, so make sure that you don't skip it. Then grab the page for the bodice and for the sleeve, and make sure that you check 1 by 1 inch test square. Now let's cut these out. We want to make sure to follow the direction of the greatest stretch, which should run perpendicular to the center front or center back of the bodice, the same way like you would be cutting a t-shirt, for example. Now once you have found that and the salvage end of the fabric, fold in the fabric and place the bodice pattern on the fold. Now we need to make sure that we add seam allowances, which will be 3/8 of an inch on the bottom and then 1/4 of an inch on all other seams. Now this was the back pattern piece. For cutting the front, we will simply remove this part of the neckline and then cut exactly as the back pattern piece. Now we have a front and the back. Let's move on to the sleeve. Here the stretch will run parallel to the hem, and seam allowances will be the same, 3/8 of an inch on the hem and 1/4 of an inch on all other seams. Usually I make a little notch on the front of the sleeve, so that way I know where's the front and where's the back when it comes time to put it all together. Now you will need to cut 2 sleeves mirrored, and once done, let's go ahead and assemble this. Now you can do this on your sewing machine or on your serger, because most most of the sewing machines will feature a stretch stitch, something like a zigzag or 3-step zigzag or a lightning stitch, or even an overcast stitch. And here you see me do that overcast stitch with an overcast foot as an example. I will be doing the rest on the serger, but I really wanted to stress that you can do it both. You don't have to have a serger. Everything that we're doing today you can do on a sewing machine for sure. Now let me take my sleeves front facing and let's take the front bodice piece as well. Now let's place the first sleeve on the bodice front to front, aligning at the curve, and let's pin. We will repeat the same step for the other sleeve as well. And after that, I'm gonna go and head to the serger to sew these seams. Now please note that my 1/4 inch seam allowances are based on the width of my serger seam, and you can of course adjust your seam allowances if you would like. Once that is done, let's fold the garment in half, right sides facing, and match at the side seam. Now we will sew the bottom of the sleeve and the side all in one go. Let me show you one moment here. In the underarm at the intersection of these seams, I like to nest my seam allowances so that way I get a really nice and clean connection and the seam looks really even on the right side of the fabric. After you have sewn both sides of the garment, let's turn it right side out and finish the neckline. Now for the neckline here, you can either use the self fabric, the knit that you're using for the top of the project, or you can use a little bit of ribbing as well. A lot of times ribbing is a little bit easier because it is so much stretcher, but you can work with both. It is equally just as beautiful. Now here, I'm just going to jump through this because I do have a very detailed video on how to create these beautiful round necklines on your knits. And if you don't like the look of the round neckline, or maybe it just doesn't always work out for you, then I have 3 alternative ways how you can finish a really beautiful knit neckline without using a ribbing or an exposed band. So I will leave both of those for you guys in the description of this video so that way you can take a look. In a nutshell, here's what I'm doing. My ribbing is cut smaller than the neckline, and here I stretch it evenly as I sew it in. Once done, nice press with the seam allowance facing away from the neckline will help with it all looking flat. After that, we can add a little bit of top stitching around the neckline, which in my case I did using a 3-step zigzag. As I mentioned, all details step by step on how to insert a neckline like this will be linked in the info box right underneath this video. Next, onto the hem of the sleeves, and here I also finished it with a 3-step zigzag, and it gives that really nice scalloped effect. For that, I'm going to fold the hem 3/8 of an inch under, the same amount as we left for the hem allowance, and then I'm going to head to the sewing machine. Now here, starting with the back stitch, I want to sew in such way that the top of the zigzag sort of like falls off the edge of the hem, but only the top. And that's what makes that really beautiful scalloped effect. Plus, the hem is still stretchy, so it's a win-win. The last step before we move on to the skirt is to interface the bottom of the bodice. I find that it really helps with holding the weight of the gathered skirt and prevents sagging and drooping of the knit on the top. You can also do this step before sewing the side seams. Now let's make the skirt and the pockets. The skirt here is just a large gathered rectangle, and usually for gathered skirts like that, you would take the total width of the bottom of the bodice and then you would multiply it, let's say by 1.5 or 2. But if my width of the fabric is just a little bit more, just a little bit less, I just go with it so that way I don't need to create extra remnants of the fabric. So for example here, total width of my fabric from selvage to selvage is about 46 inches, but total width of the bottom of the bodice, front and back, is about 24 inches, a little bit more than that. For the length of the rectangle, I'm going to take 18 inches, and that's already including hem allowances and seam allowances. Once I have cut this rectangle, I'm also going to fold it in half and then cut it again, so that way I can create the front and the back pattern piece. As for the pockets, you will need to cut 2 pieces mirrored for each patch pocket, following the gray line of the pattern. For the seam allowances, we will be adding 1/4 of an inch for each of the curves and 3/8 of an inch on the side and on the top. Now in total, you will have 4 pocket pieces. Place them right sides together and sew the curves with 1/4 of an inch seam allowances, just with a straight stitch with the back stitch at the top and at the beginning of the seam. Now you don't need to clip or notch the seam allowance, just simply turn the pocket right side out and let's give it a really good press. Once I have pressed my pocket and it looks flat and crisp, my goal is to make it to look like this one. Now in your case, you don't need to do decorative stitching. I just sort of wanted to jazz it up and play around with it a little bit. But what we do need to do is to add top stitching, and we're going to start with a small curve. Here I'm doing that just with a straight stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I will take this pocket and I will line it up with the straight edges with a skirt, so the top and the side, and then I will pin it. Now I want to top stitch the long curve of the pocket directly to the skirt using the same technique that we did for the small curve. Once both pockets are attached, we can then place 2 rectangles of the skirt or right sides together and sew the side seams, catching the pockets in those side seams. So with 3/8 of an inch, we will do a straight stitch first and then finish it with a serger or any other technique of your choice. Then comes the hem of the skirt, which is a simple double fold hem. I will fold in 1/4 of an inch first, then another 1/4 of an inch, and finish it with a straight stitch. Now, while working with this beautiful light blue cotton, I was sort of debating whether to add a second layer or not, but I decided to be on a safe side. And because the knit for the bodice has a little bit of green in it, I decided to add a second layer in this bright green color. Now, the second layer has exactly the same dimensions as the first, it's just a little bit shorter, so it doesn't peek from underneath the skirt. And it's finished the same way. Side seams are sewn, and then the bottom is hemmed. Now I'm going to place 2 layers of the skirts together, and I will treat them like one, and I will do the longest basting stitch on my sewing machine all the way on the top edge of the skirt, so that way I can gather it. Sometimes I do 2 rows of basting stitches to have sort of a little bit more control, and then all we have left to do is to gather the actual skirt. And since we have side seams on both, on the bodice and on the skirt, the goal is to align them and then evenly distribute the gathers in the middle. Now when that is done, let's pin the skirt to the bodice right sides together. Now to attach the skirt, I do a regular straight stitch, and then the edges are finished with a serger. Now, since this is a dress for Project Dresser Girl, I want to add extra stability. So with the skirt seam allowance facing to the bodice, I have top stitched that with a 3-step zigzag stitch to match the top stitching on the neckline. You did it! You made a dress. Thank you so much. And here's another project for your little ones. This time we are drafting and sewing shorts. Real easy, real simple, and you will be done in no time. Take a look right over here. Until next time, sew and grow and create beautiful things. I'll see you very soon. Bye!